You're listening to the Yoga Medicine Podcast. I'm your host, Tiffany Cruikshank. Our podcast brings you information and resources to enhance the therapeutic effects of your practice based on a deeper understanding of anatomy, physiology, and the integration of modern science and research with traditional practices and experiences. Join me and my co-hosts, Rachel Land and Katya Barch, as we dive into all things yoga, research, and wellness. Welcome back. We're here to chat today about hands-on physical assists and adjustments, which I think is a really important and interesting topic, especially obviously as a yoga teacher, but probably could apply to maybe even personal trainers and maybe some other professions, who knows, but mostly for yoga teachers. And kind of weigh out the pros and cons. I think it's an important conversation to have as a yoga teacher.
And I'm happy to be having this one with you because I suspect we've come from quite different backgrounds in terms of whether hands-on assists were a normal part of our practice or not. I know you had some experience in Ashtanga, and Ashtanga is renowned for strong physical assists and for them being sort of part of the process, whereas I came up in a much more gentle kind of hatha style that had no hands-on. And so the first time I was introduced to it was in Power Vinyasa, and I still remember the thought process of experiencing it for the first time. So hopefully we'll have some varied perspectives to share as practitioners as well as teachers.
Yeah, and I will say my perspectives on this have definitely changed a lot over the years, though I do think I've always had some common threads, but definitely in Ashtanga, I think for me, and this was a long time ago, I haven't taught Ashtanga in a very long time, but there was an intrigue with learning those adjustments and being able to twist someone up in a pretzel and being able to get them into poses they could never dream of, and being able to like put yourself in these positions to like perfectly, do this wonderful, amazing adjustment. And it was interesting at the time, but well, we'll get to it. I won't get ahead of myself.
I'm intrigued. Color me intrigued.
You know my approach is different now. And anyone who's done our trainings, which is probably a large chunk of the people listening have done at least something with us, maybe online, know that I don't like to interact a ton anymore. But I think there's a time and a place for it. And as you do. So
yeah, and maybe we start with the case 4, because my definite bias is against. And again, anyone who's ever heard me talk, I suspect, knows that I don't like people touching me and I don't like touching other people. So because my bias tends to be no to hands-on assists, maybe we start with the opposite side, that I actually do believe that there is a place and a time for them and some benefits to them as well.
Well, and I also think that we've kind of gone from a time where we were really heavy. I mean, I think in yoga across the board, regardless of the style that you teach, where just generally speaking, there used to be a lot more adjustments. Mm-hmm. And over the last 10 years or so, that's kind of changed. And I think there are just generally a lot less of them. Maybe COVID influenced that a little bit. Maybe there were a lot of other...
That's the thing too. We have a whole generation of teachers, 5 years worth of teachers, many of whom have been trained without any hands-on interaction with other trainees or their teachers. And so even if they have learned hands-on assists theoretically, they haven't learned them in person interactively, and they may not use them in their teaching. There are teachers out there who now offer solely online classes and experiences. And so they just hold a different place now to the place they used to hold.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I think there is a powerful place for it. I think there's a lot of different ways to use physical touch. In that Ashtanga example, a lot of times it is to help people get into positions that they might not normally be able to get into. And if, your goal with your yoga practice is to be able to, in quotes, do a pose, which is so like not anti-yoga medicine, but not really, I think doesn't really jive as much with what we do here at Yoga Medicine. But if your goal is to like make a pose look a certain way, look like a picture, I think that can be helpful. I think, a lot of times in yoga medicine, our goal is more to consider how it feels, or to consider the range of motion available, or to, look at it through a different lens, which we'll talk to maybe more when we talk about the case not for it. But I do think, one, if your goal is to, in quotes, get into a pose, sometimes it can be helpful. Mm-hmm. There's the other extreme of just adjustments that are just massage or soothing, or like Thai massage kind of gets into yoga a lot, which I think can be nice too. I used to love going around and giving massages and shavasana 10 or 15, 20, I don't know how many years ago now.
Time's an elastic
15 years
concept.
ago.
I really go with just pre-COVID and post-COVID. That's my timeline these days. Yeah, and that's actually where I first started. That therapeutic touch is there's undeniable power in touch, in a compassionate touch from a kindly person, and I don't want to discount that power. Most people love massage. Most people instinctively reach out to touch others when they're in any kind of distress or when they want to offer support. So there is real power in touch, and there is a sense of even healing that can come from it, of giving somebody an experience of feeling good and feeling nourished and feeling nurtured in their body. So that was the first category that I thought of, that more feel good type. I'm not trying to move you anywhere. I'm not trying to get you anywhere. I'm just helping you dissolve a little tension or have a nice experience in your body. But even on the ones that you talked about first, the physical moving body into space, intellectually I can see benefits to that too. If there's an aspect of a pose that you just can't find your own way to, not for joint limitation reasons, but just because you've never been there, so you can't quite visualize where you're going, I can see how being helped to get there might then help you reverse engineer. Oh, it's this that I'm
Yeah.
getting to. So if I move that and shift this and press here and lift there, that's how I can get back to that place. So I also get intellectually that concept too, of helping someone to a place that they couldn't have found their way to without knowing the way already.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a small part of it. I think a lot of times we can guide people with our visuals, our demos, our cues, and get there, and then we don't risk the issue of like pushing someone beyond their capacity. But
Yeah.
I do think there is a small, and because of those things, which we'll talk to more, like because of those things, I think it is a small group of people that just need to find their way there.
Yeah.
And
I
doing
guess
that carefully, of course.
the easiest example for me of this is something like balancing and handstand, where you can use your fingertips in a little circle around people's feet so that you're not actually moving them there, but you're giving them tactile feedback: too far forward, too far back, too far to the left, too far to the right. And from that touch, they can find their way to center. So I'm thinking of that sort of thing. Or the version that I might use still in my teaching is, move your spine into my hand, or move your knee into my hand, so that they're getting tactile feedback of, oh, it's here, or this is the place that I'm aiming for, that I thought I was already getting to, that I wasn't.
Yeah.
So lots of applications for that can be helpful.
And the great thing about the one you just mentioned too is that then they are actually learning it. Push into my hand, resist me here. They're feeling that, they're finding it. And eventually, and maybe just from one adjustment, but eventually they can recreate that. And that's kind of the whole point, right? We want to empower our students. We want to, arm them with the tools they need to move through the world. And so, yeah, and I think inversions are a great case for that. Obviously, I think even wheel can be an interesting one, where they're grabbing your ankles and maybe you're wrapping their shoulders. Obviously, I need to kind of see what they look like in that pose already, because I don't want to just, some people aren't even really, yeah, I'm just going to yank them up. But yeah, that generally is an adjustment that feels really nice and helps people kind of get into their chest when the shoulders are so limiting that they're feeling it in their lower back. So there can be a lot of those hacks where, maybe they aren't able to do a pose like wheel without feeling it in the lower back, and I can maybe adjust and help them. Now, it's not fixing the root cause, the problem behind that, of course. So, I might want to do some other things to address the upper back and shoulder tension in other ways, but it can be a nice way to help them appreciate wheel pose. But I can't be there for them every time. That's the reality. And, unless it's a private client. And even then, they're still really dependent on me. I always want to give them things to be independent. So useful, cool, interesting, helpful.
Yeah.
Certain times.
And I think those kinds of sort of teacher assists used to feel, or at least to me, my perception was that was a more advanced level of teaching. I remember when I I had been teaching for a few years and I was going to start assisting for yoga medicine. I went to do a weekend course in hands-on assists to sort of add more to my repertoire, because in my mind, that was what a more advanced teacher did. They could sort of look at you in a pose and see ways that they could intervene to help. And that didn't last very long. I think that lasted a couple of days before I was like, I don't trust my eye. I don't always know what's going on. I'd rather have a conversation with the person and say, what are you feeling? Is there any way I can help? Have you tried blocks? Have you tried a strap? Maybe this pose isn't for you. Maybe try the version with, whatever. So it didn't last long, but it did give me a chance to recognize that that was my sort of assumption, my stereotype going in.
Well, and I think it brings us to that reminder too. Let's back up and say you should always be asking for consent.
Yes.
Consent, one, but also I think asking how they feel in a pose. You
Yes.
might be coming up to them thinking you want to help them get, in quotes, further into a pose. Because I don't think of it as further. I just think of it as different iterations of a pose for different bodies. But maybe you want to help them find a fuller expression of the pose for that person. And you ask them, and they're like, they communicate that they're already in a pretty intense expression of this pose. And I do think that communication is really important. People, I mean, we know that, well, I don't think we know this as much as we could, but I think the more you start to ask this as a yoga teacher, you realize what a good poker face your students have. Like they do, and or afterwards they'll come up and be like, wow, that was so hard. And you'll be like, geez, I had no idea you looked so unfazed, or like some people have a really good poker face. So asking those questions, I think, is really important. And, I think being resourceful, like I used to love doing Marichasana adjustments in Ashtanga, sitting on their leg. And that was really great because it helped them tip their pelvis forward so they didn't get this like hunched over rounded spine when they were doing
So this is a
binds.
seated twist with a bind around the knee.
Twist with a full bind around the knee. And it would help them rock their pelvis forward, which got them into a better position with their spine. I would leverage my foot on their shin and my arm around them. And I had this whole thing I would do. And it was really great. But, what if I could teach them just sit on the edge of a blanket to, to find some of this on their own. And maybe some people do find that over time. I think in Ashtanga, you'd find those people who really became dependent on the adjustments and the people who kind of use it as a stepping stone. And sometimes it's not a matter of choice. Sometimes that's just your body's limitations.
Yes.
And you're not going to do it without some help. And I don't know, we could have a whole debate on whether it's helpful to have someone else do it for you or not. I mean, I think we've kind of already had that a little bit, but.
So even circling back to that conversation, which started with consent, clearly we come from very different backgrounds, and I think we often teach very different people, because I can't imagine sitting on the leg of one of my students and helping them into a bind without something cracking.
Well, just to be clear, I wasn't sitting. It was my leg draped over them. It wasn't my whole pelvis.
And secondly, you talk about people having amazing poker faces. My experience is usually the opposite. Is I'll be looking at somebody who looks desperately uncomfortable, and I'll say, how's that feeling for you? And they're like, oh, fine. And I'll say, how's that shoulder? Does your shoulder feel okay? Yeah, fine. Okay. Do you want anything tucked underneath it? Or no, I'm good. Okay. So
I mean the poker in both ways, the poker face, right? Like you just don't know what's going on inside.
Yeah. And I do think that's a really helpful place for a teacher to start. Even if you think you have a good eye, assume you don't and just ask, because different people's faces and postures communicate different things. And when you ask, how's that feeling? What are you feeling there? Where are you feeling that? You're going to get the information from the horse's mouth. And then asking consent, I think, is key these days. It's just the standard. It used to be the standard that you would offer the assist and somebody could say no. And now the standard is you ask, and not just, can I give you an assist here, but can I put my hand on your back, or can I put my hand on the outside of your knee, so they know what they're agreeing to in advance. Because you don't want to say, yes, I'm okay with an assist, and then have some sweaty, half-naked man lying on your back, like it used to be pretty common.
It was incredibly common. And I haven't done Ashtanga in, 15 years. Who knows? I can't count. But yeah, that was definitely the norm, and people liked it. And I mean, I think probably people who know me teaching probably are laughing too to think of me like with myself wrapped around someone.
And I think
I
too,
taught my sword for a long time and I loved it.
proportions really matter, because I remember early days of teaching with yoga medicine, I'd see you do assists and think, how are you getting your knees there and your fingertips there on the same you've got long limbs, I've got much shorter limbs. The assist that worked and felt very natural for you didn't always work or feel natural for me. So that's another side of it, is when we did learn hands-on assists, they were often taught in a fairly specific way that obviously worked for the teacher's proportions, but didn't always work for the learner's proportions. And some of it really does come down to what size and shape is the student compared to the size and shape of the teacher. There's a lot more to it than you might have thought from just, going into an assisting teacher training.
Absolutely. And I think what it comes down to, whether we're talking about the soothing adjustments or
Mm-hmm.
the more alignment, like simple, like press into my hand,
Mm-hmm.
or helping them get into a pose,
Mm-hmm.
as however complex or simple that is. I think for me, what it comes down to is this helpful for them? And again, I think that could be in a one-off, but more importantly, over time, are they just dependent on me?
Yes.
Because if they're just dependent on me doing this adjustment for them, to me that's not helpful, because to me yoga is an empowerment tool. It's a tool of training myself, my students, to be
Mm-hmm.
able to use their own bodies to help themselves, whether that be self-soothing, calming their nervous system and like the soothing adjustments, or finding that alignment or position, or the strength and skill to find a position on their own, or range of motion to find a
Yeah.
position. I mean, I think to me that's the key. Are they becoming dependent on me? One off can feel really nice. And then if they are dependent on me, how long is me holding them in that wheel shape, opening their chest for them? I mean, like I might stay there for 5 breaths with them, but is that really going to have a significant impact on them? No,
Yeah.
no,
So
it's the other things we do.
you've highlighted the first and maybe the most fundamental potential downside of hands-on assists, which is unless you're transitioning it into something that they can do themselves, like sit a little further forward on their sit bones in your seated twist example, or draw the shoulder blades back to really open their chest in the wheel example, then it is only a temporary thing. And, perhaps there are ways you can bridge that gap and make it more long lasting, like the shoulder and upper back mobility that you talked about for wheel, or teaching somebody to sit on the edge of a blanket for a twist so they can get more upright, or imagine that you're pressing into my hand. Unless you can bridge the gap, that
Mm,
first potential downside is it's a one-off experience. And ideally, you want the student to be able to own and inhabit that alignment for themselves.
yeah. And I think as a teacher, it's much more interesting to me to theme a class, like let's just take the wheel pose variation, that works toward that opening in the shoulders, rather than just yanking them into it, and helping them find that, teaching them how to mobilize their shoulder blades or work into their chest or their upper back. And I mean, that's just my opinion though. And to each their own. I know some people really love adjustments, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so that's one big one. The other one, probably the most obvious one that we've hinted at but not said directly, is there's always potential if you're moving somebody else's body without knowing how it feels on the inside, that you can move them further than they want to go or than they can go. Or you could always hurt somebody. So I feel like I've never had that experience of being hurt in an adjustment, but I know plenty of people have. So you have. It's possible. It's certainly possible.
Oh
Less
my
so with
gosh.
the move into my hand ones, but definitely more so with the let's get your foot behind your head type ones.
Well, and I think I've always been very flexible, and I think people kind of singled me out because of that
I'm
adjustment
pretty
and
sure
take me
she can get
deeper.
there.
Yeah, and I remember
She's just not
one.
working hard enough.
This was a newish teacher, and not new, but anyways, she was a power yoga teacher, and we were doing frog pose, and she just came and pushed down on my pelvis, and I was pretty close. I was, if not on the floor, pretty close to the floor. Man, was that the most painful thing that I have ever had. And it lasted for a while, and I still don't like that pose.
I thought you
And
were going to
it's
say
a
that
very
teacher.
it's a very vulnerable position. Well, I didn't
Yeah.
appreciate it from her. I knew she didn't mean to, but I kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, I mean, it's your body. And as a teacher, when someone does that to you, it's even more so because you rely on your body for your livelihood. And
Hmm.
I think it's a very vulnerable place. And like you said before about the poker face, we don't ever know what someone's feeling. Sometimes they're feeling more than we think. Sometimes they're feeling less than we think. And even before, when I was doing adjustments, when I did more adjustments, I was always asking them. I was watching their breath. I was,
Yeah.
checking in. So I do think, regardless, it's so important to have that feedback and check in and go
And I've
slow so
also,
that they can respond and tell you.
yeah. And I've also had some experiences where I have adjusted somebody into a shape and then I've gone, does that feel better? And they'll kind of be like, meh. And I'm like, let's come back to where you were. So I do think you've got to go in with some humility of, I thought this would help. It actually doesn't look like it's helping. Were you more comfortable where you were? Come on back to where you were. I think going in with that space is also really helpful. You shouldn't feel like, well, I've done it now, I'm committed.
I'm not the all-knowing teacher,
Right,
right? And
right.
that to me is part of this conversation we talk about a lot. Is there's always this conversation I'm trying to plant seeds for in my yoga classes, that you are your own best teacher. It's not up to me to decide, because I don't know what it feels like to be in your body. I don't know what you did all day or all week or all your lifetime, like your history. Like, I don't know all these reasons that maybe this might not be a good pose for you. And so I think those little things, like I do that a lot in restorative. And a lot of times I'll go up to someone and be like, how do you feel? And they might even be like, fine. And a lot of times I'll leave them alone then. But if I feel really strongly about wanting to look a little better because it looks really uncomfortable,
crowded or
I
cramped.
might say, well, look, let's just try this. And if you don't like it, you can go back to this, and maybe, 20% of the time they want to go back to it. And that's fine. I'm
Yeah.
not, if they're able to relax into it, I personally am not going to overly, attach myself to what it looks like. Although, we've seen those people in restorative where there's just no way they can be relaxed.
And yet they say they are. And to
But
me, this,
usually they like it better, right? Usually you do the thing and they're like, oh, yes,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
often it is something I'd offered verbally, but they didn't take the verbal invitation. But if I kind of show them right next to them or help them get the props in the
yeah.
right place, often they are happier. And this to me is a more subtle potential benefit, but also a more subtle potential harm, which is what you were saying, that suggestion that the teacher is the all-seeing, all-knowing, that potential that we might override their body autonomy just by being the expert at the front of the room. And I had an experience of this that really changed the way I viewed hands-on assists. I'd never been a big fan. I'd never had a lot of experience, but I did my training and I thought, a good advanced teacher would give hands-on and would help people. And I gave a male student just a sort of shoulder press down in shavasana, just kind of on the top of the pecs, just below the collarbones, eased his shoulders a little flatter to the mat, just a really gentle chest stretch, eased out, wandered away, thought nothing of it. And after class, he came up and said, oh, when you corrected my shoulders in shavasana, and I didn't, and I mean, the rest of the sentence was positive, but the first part of the sentence broke my heart, because I don't want somebody in Shavasana at the end of class where I am expecting nothing from them and they are really just to rest. I never want someone to feel like I was doing it wrong. I was relaxing wrong and she corrected me. And now I've got to keep my shoulders in that position. So we had a conversation. I'm not completely confident that he took away that he was fine before. And I was just trying to help him feel, a nice little feel good assist. Didn't mean anything by it. Didn't mean he had to stay there. But that to me really shifted my approach to hands-on, because I never want to feel like you were relaxing wrong and I helped you relax correctly. No.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I think this is such a great point, that I think a lot of times, I think we could do this sometimes with the language we use in cueing, but I think a lot of times those adjustments do convey the message of, I want you to do it right. I want you to do it this way to look like the picture. And I think there was a lot of that in the 90s and the early 2000s in yoga, of like everyone having to look like the picture. And at the time, yoga was kind of dead in India. The only place you really saw it was in schools. It really was an act of discipline in schools that children were taught. And so there very much was this, like, you have to do it this way, the right way. And that really, I think, bled over into the US and the way we taught it back then. And luckily, I think, this is my opinion, luckily yoga has now also been changed by our modern, our modern understanding of what we want in the world and how we want to use this practice. But I agree. I just think you and I and everyone, I think many of the people who study with yoga medicine and have been on our podcast know that there's so much to the human anatomy and our bodies that is just so uniquely different. Some people will never get into lotus, and that's just their bony structure. you, I could do it the first day. It just happened. That was my bony structure. I mean, that's an extreme example, but we are different people. And not only are we different, bodies that we're born with, but those bodies are then influenced by all the things we do or don't do, all the yoga we do or don't do, by how we see ourselves and perceive ourselves and what we think is good or bad or right or wrong. And
Mhm.
so I just think taking away, and I think this is so, in style now too, which is good. I love that. Like taking away this idea of it being right or wrong is
Mhm.
really important. And I do think adjustments can be one way of communicating that to people. Like, you need to do it this way. I'm going to make your pose better.
Yeah. And I mean, let's be honest, some students want that. I have this
Yeah.
conversation with one of my students all the time where she's like, "Am I doing it right?" And I'm like, "Well, tell me how you feel." "No, you tell me you're doing it right." "No, you tell me how you feel."
Right.
So
And
it
this is
didn't
the
have a
conversation
go.
with the non yoga teacher too, because that's the reality, of the people who come who are students who aren't like professional yogis that don't
Yeah.
practice yoga a lot. They want to do it right because they want to get the benefits. And I think that's the right thing to say, like it's a conversation, right? That we have to have. Is like,
Yeah.
well, I want this to be your expression of the pose,
Mhm.
I want the pose to be used to help you, not you making the best pose you can at your own sacrifice of your body.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, that conversation is a lot easier to have one-on-one than it is in a group class. If you've got 20 people in a class and one of them is going, "Am I doing it right?" and you're going, "Tell me how you feel," while everybody else is still holding the pose, that's going to get old really quickly. But these
Well,
could
and
be
like you said,
conversations that
people
you have
come up
after
with you.
class.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, so I guess maybe the last downside for me of hands-on physical assists is you've got so many other tools in your toolkit that I would call on first: verbal cues, demonstrations, getting people to use props, and even the really simple ones, like imagine my hand is on the outside of your knee, or imagine my hand is on your spine in between your shoulder blades, press into my hand. You've got so many options before it gets to actually putting hands on people that usually I feel like it's not necessary.
Yeah. And I think our language is such an interesting thing, which is like, that's a whole nother conversation too, the nuance of our language and how it
Hmm.
can, draw out different movements in different people. Like I love this one of like your pubic bone chasing your chin and up dog to kind of get that low belly
I've
engaging.
never heard that before. That's going to take me a minute to think my way through.
And
I'm
back bends
imagining
for
like
people who tend to
Roadrunner and
lay in their low back to
uh-huh,
kind of instigate that low belly
uh-huh.
engagement. I had a few people comment on that in one of my classes recently. I think that kind of, I mean, it hits for some people, and other people are
Yeah,
like, throw it out if it doesn't work, especially
sure.
if you're not someone who lays in your lower back. You don't really need it too much. But I do think, I mean, this kind of taps into what we were talking about earlier. I think using verbal cues and demonstrations can be a much better way of getting people to find it in their body so that they can recreate it, so that they're actively creating these shapes that they can come back to,
Hmm.
or if it's a mobility issue, is like building that into your sequencing to
Yes.
prepare the mobility for that.
Yeah, and that was what you spoke to earlier in your example of wheel, of sequencing a whole class to get everybody's upper back, chest, shoulders ready for that end shape. And the really wonderful thing about that is not only does it give you something really concrete to sequence around, you can give that assist, for lack of a better word, to an entire class of people, whereas you can
Yeah.
only really give the hands on to one, maybe two people. So it kind of compounds your effectiveness.
Yeah, and I feel like as a teacher, as much as I used to love doing assists, as I'm going and assisting someone, my attention is really on them now. Whereas if I'm focused on cueing or demoing, I'm really focused and taking in the whole class or part
Hmm.
of it. You can't always see the whole class and be conscious of everything, but I have a much broader perspective of what's happening, the vibe, the feeling, the tone. I'm also not leaving people in one side longer than the other or leaving them in a
Right.
pose,
Uh-huh.
it's just the worst. You're like, did they forget about me?
Yeah,
Us, the rest of
right.
us, the other 40 people in the class, Yeah.
Are we ready to start summing up?
Well, I think there's just two last ones here for me. One is like I think this kind of goes to the like more relaxing massages, the
Yes.
hands-on kind of feel-good massages, is that touch actually isn't technically in our scope of practice. We don't really
Hmm.
have a scope, and like especially in the US, we're more litigious here. I think hands-on things, though it doesn't seem to be problematic. I mean, we don't want to tiptoe into. I do think bringing in a lot of Thai massage and things like that is like, we're not body workers. We should probably be trained in that if but it can be a fun workshop for people to enjoy it. I don't know that it's
Yeah, that to me is the key. Is if you do have
yoga.
special training, if you're kind of bringing in your Thai massage background, there will be people who
Cool.
love that and are really into it. If you can create an avenue that people know what they're signing up for, like a workshop or a master class or even a regular class that's really clearly titled, if people know what they're coming for and people want that and seek it out, awesome.
Yeah.
Everybody's happy.
Yeah, and people love that in the yoga world.
Yeah, some
But
people
touch
do.
is
Not everybody.
technically technically yeah, I know. And I don't necessarily either, but touch is not in our scope. So that's
Yeah.
just something. And I do think it's a gray area. I think resist my hand, push into me here, those things, but as we're tiptoeing in massage. The
Hmm.
other thing that I think, and this is kind of my personal opinion, is that I do think sometimes physical adjustments can take us out of our body, whether that's the massage and shavasana. It kind of takes me out of that experience that I'm looking for in shavasana. For me, I personally, as a student, don't love adjustments anymore either because it does take me out of my own. To me, this is a personal practice. This is
Hmm.
my shit that I'm working with. Like, I'm the one who knows it. I'm the one who's here. I want to figure out how to do it. So if I'm not in it right, like tell me or show me. But I personally don't really love someone anymore. And I used to like adjustments, but it's just a personal preference. I don't love someone in my space when
Right?
to me this is meant to be an internal practice.
Yeah,
So
and I mean you've come all the way back around to where I started, which is how I walk into the room feeling. This is about me exploring my existence, physical, mental, energetic, otherwise. And
yes.
yes, I'm looking for a teacher to help, to ask some questions, to prompt some reflection, to offer some challenges. But that's it. It's about my interaction with those, and for me, that space to be in my own experience is literally the only thing that has kept me coming back to practice for
Yeah.
30 whatever years is that inquiry, that exploration.
And each class is a little different. Some classes you really feel that really introspective feeling, and some are more playful, and that's fine. I mean, and I'm also not the person who loves partner yoga. Though if I had signed up for a workshop and showed up for it, I would appreciate that. I just don't personally love it in the middle of a class
Yeah.
again, because to me, my practice is a sanctuary. It's my own personal investigation and inquiry,
Yeah.
and it feels very personal. And I don't mind if someone wants to come and like a lot of times what I'll do sometimes if I want to in quotes adjust one person is maybe stand next to them and like as we're moving. I mean, it may be in a transition, it may be in the pose, and kind of show them, by standing next to them and
Mm.
showing them, and obviously having little eye contact communication so they know that I'm there for a
I'm talking to
reason.
you.
Yes, like
Your
there's
feet,
just a little
your
like
legs.
like nonverbal communication that happens, that you can show them, and that can be helpful. And but it still is their space. It's still their drawing board to create what they want, to decide how far they want to go. Do they want to sit deeper in warrior B? Do they want to back off? Like what day did they have? Are they here? I mean, I'm always really pushing people to take what they need from a class,
Yeah.
knowing that in one class with a group, everyone's going to need different things. And I really think it's possible to show up with that intention of like, okay, I'm going to this vinyasa class, but I am kind of depleted. And so I'm going to go through this in a more conservative, introspective awareness as more of a source of nourishment. Same practice. Or like, man, I've been sitting at my desk. I just need to move and get things
Hmm.
out. And I can approach that same practice in that way. But as a teacher, I have no freaking clue,
Yeah. And if you think you do, if you're telling yourself you do have a clue, it's really dangerous waters because people have great poker faces. You don't know what their history is. You don't know what's happened to them, not just today, but through the entirety of their lives. And so I think it's really best to set that illusion aside. And if you do really want to offer hands-on assist to people, to make sure that there is some conversation as well. You watching them really closely and also asking them, what are you feeling? Where are you feeling it? How is that? Does that make any difference? Does that give you more space in your neck and shoulders? Did you prefer it the other way? There's got to be that interaction, because otherwise you are imposing your worldview on an individual, another individual.
And those conversations can be really succinct, but
yes.
Yeah, but I agree.
So I should say, when you mentioned partner yoga, full disclosure, I have taught partner yoga classes. I used to do them for Valentine's Day early in my teaching. Like, you can bring a friend or we'll pay you up. Nothing
My brain
sexy.
is exploding right now,
right?
Rachel.
I know, right? I went through a phase of, and I would say this to new teachers, do be willing to try out a whole heap of stuff to see what sticks, what you like, what you're good at, what people respond to. It did not stick. It did not stick. And I did have the odd person come and then realize, oh, you meant partner yoga with another person, and leave. And I respect that too. So clear advertising is key. Yeah, clear advertising is key. Yeah.
Yes, and as always, setting and meeting expectations in a group description. Like,
crucial.
Don't turn a vinyasa class into a group partner class.
Yeah. I've made all the mistakes. I'm not saying I haven't, but I'm telling you, learn from my experience. So I guess if we're summing up, touch is powerful. It's a really potent thing, for good or for bad. And so if you are going to touch somebody in class, you definitely need to make sure that you're doing it with consent, and also that you're doing it with a real sense of humility. Because, as you said, for yoga teachers, it's a pretty big gray area as to whether we are even trained to, whether it is even appropriate for us to put our hands on people. So go in super humble, looking for their guidance.
Well, and I'll just put this caveat in here. We didn't even talk about, the power differential or the sexual connotations or misinterpretations of touch, which can be a really big thing as well. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah. And probably not the first thing that came to our minds, because we are both in female bodies teaching majority female presenting people in classes. I'm sure if I were a male teacher, that would have been one of the top things on my list.
I would hope so, but you still see it a lot. I mean,
okay, if you were a thoughtful and introspective male teacher, the male teachers I know, for example, it would definitely be very close to the top of their list of making sure that what they're doing is completely appropriate and has no risk of being misinterpreted. Yeah. So yeah, that's probably why we didn't get to that. So if you are going to use touch, know that it's a really potent thing. I leave space in my own mind for it being a pathway to get somebody to a shape that they didn't fully understand or didn't realize that they could get to. Intellectually, I understand that use. I don't feel like that's something I would do in my teaching. I'd rather somebody never get there, wherever there is, unless they can kind of get there some other way. But I leave space for that possibility out in the world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But in general, there are so many other tools. Why not just use the other tools? Why not use your voice, your demonstrations, props, an entire sequence that gets everybody in the class to the place that you were hoping they would get to, whether that is more awareness of their pelvic position or more opportunities with their chest and shoulder position. Why not just use one of the other pathways that are kind of easier, safer, and more importantly, more long-lasting for that individual? Something that they have found their own way to, that they can find their way back to again, whether you're in the room or not.
I love that. And I think the most powerful assist is teaching them the owner's manual to their body, helping them find their way, that neurologic patterning and training. And yeah, I love it.
100%. That's the game-changing assist right there, is the one that the person learns to make for themselves.
Yep.
Well, you heard it here first.
Awesome. This was such a good conversation, and hopefully this was helpful for those of you who are teachers, maybe even interesting as a student. But as always, if you love the podcast, leave us a 5-star review. Let us know what you want to hear more of. We love your comments. We love everything. So we hope it's helpful, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks for listening to Yoga Medicine. If you like the show, please be sure to subscribe and leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you got something out of this episode, please spread the word and share it with a friend. You can find more information, articles, trainings, and classes at yogamedicine.com, or check us out on social media as Yoga Medicine. You can also email us at info@yogamedicine.com. Thank you for being a part of our Yoga Medicine community. We look forward to seeing you again. The content of this podcast is not medical advice and is not meant to replace medical care. Please consult your healthcare provider to determine what is best for your unique healthcare needs.